Imagine Oak Island, a place where mystery has lived for centuries, a place whispered about in legends, stories, and secret conversations. For years, people have spoken about hidden treasure, pirate gold, and secrets buried deep underground. But this time, something happened that shocked not only the team working there, but also people all around the world. The work that had been going on for so long was suddenly stopped. Overnight, the entire island went into lockdown. No one was allowed inside, not even the people who had dedicated their lives to uncovering its mysteries. It was as if the ground itself had given up something so powerful, so unimaginable, that it could change everything we know about history. At first, the island looked like it always had. The calm waters, the familiar trees, and the pits dug from years of searching. But behind this quiet surface, something was brewing. Excavations that had started as routine digs suddenly uncovered artifacts that were nothing like the discoveries of the past. Coins, wooden beams, rusted metal, those were expected. But now, new objects were coming out of the earth. Objects with strange carvings, symbols, and markings that didn't match any known language or civilization. These were not the kind of things a treasure hunter would normally expect. These were clues that pointed to something much bigger, something far more dangerous. The deeper the team dug, the more questions appeared. Security around the site increased. Guards, who had never been seen before, were suddenly everywhere. Large tents and tarps covered the excavation sites, blocking the view of cameras, drones, and even some of the crew members themselves. It was no longer just a search for treasure, it had become a tightly guarded operation. Some members of the team began to notice that meetings were happening in secret, and only a few people were allowed to attend. Others, even those who had worked for years on Oak Island, were left out completely. Among the team was Emma Culligan, a sharp researcher who had joined not long ago. She had been at the center of some of the most important discoveries, and her presence brought energy and excitement to the project. But as the discoveries became more unusual, even she began to feel the tension. Orders came without explanations. Digging stopped suddenly without reason, and slowly, Emma herself disappeared from the public eye. The fans noticed. Where had she gone? Why was she no longer speaking about the excavation? No one would answer. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, past midnight, when the team was still working. The ground was being dug carefully, layer by layer, when something strange happened. First, there was a sound. It wasn't the sound of machinery. It wasn't the normal hum of excavation. This was different. A heavy echo, a vibration that seemed to rise from deep below the earth itself. Workers shut off the machines, thinking it might be equipment. But even in silence, the sound continued. It pulsed through the ground, shaking the very soil under their feet. And then, light. Faint at first, almost invisible, but there, a glow rising from beneath the surface, blue mixed with gold, like a shimmer that didn't belong in the natural world. Some said it looked like a door was opening. Others swore they saw shadows moving, figures that could not be explained. Panic spread among the workers. Some dropped their tools and ran. Cameras stopped recording. Fear took over the site. No one could understand what was happening, only that it was not normal. Rick and Marty, the brothers who had dreamed of solving Oak Island's mystery since childhood, tried to take control, but even the silence that followed was unbearable. Cameras panned across the crowd, capturing faces marked by tension, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others wide-eyed as if history itself had just fractured before them. Cardinals shifted uneasily in their seats. Bishops whispered among themselves. The kind of hushed tones reserved for grave matters whispered behind closed doors, not beneath the blinding lights of a global broadcast. And then, for the first time since the words left his lips, Pope Francis spoke again. His voice was steadier now, yet undeniably strained. "Brother, Leo," he said slowly, measuring each word, "unity is not a suggestion. It is the very lifeblood of our church. To challenge me here, before the faithful, is to risk tearing apart the very flock entrusted to us." But Pope Leo XIV did not back down. His gaze never wavered. Instead, he leaned forward, the weight of centuries of tradition echoing in his words. "What tears the church apart is silence in the face of compromise. What wounds the faithful is not division but deception." Gasps rippled through the audience. The air thickened, like a storm gathering just before it breaks. Even the translators' voices cracked as they relayed Leo's words into countless languages. Francis's hand trembled as he gripped the edge of the lectern, his knuckles white. His eyes, usually warm and pastoral, now burned with the fire of betrayal. This was no longer a dialogue, it was a duel, waged not with swords, but with conviction before the eyes of the world. The Vatican staff glanced nervously at one another, unsure if they should cut the feed. The thought alone was heresy in itself. Could they silence a pope on live television? Could they silence the popes? And then it happened. A voice from the crowd, trembling yet resolute, cried out, "Holy Father Leo, speak the truth." It was like a match dropped into dry grass. Suddenly, more voices rose. Some cheered for Francis, clinging to stability. Others roared for Leo, demanding transparency and reform. Within seconds, the hall had transformed into a battlefield of voices, faith colliding with faith, allegiance colliding with allegiance. The camera zoomed in on Francis. His lips moved, but his words were drowned out by the cacophony. His eyes flickered with something rare fear, and Pope Leo XIV simply stood tall. He made no gesture to quiet the crowd. He did not flinch. He let the wave crash around him, as though he had known it would come all along. The network executives finally made their move. Without warning, the broadcast cut to a black screen. Then, the Vatican's official seal. But it was too late. The world had already seen. The world had already heard. And nothing would ever be the same again. They knew something was wrong. The excavation was shut down immediately. Guards took for weeks. Nothing more was said officially. Reporters camped along the coast, desperate to catch even a glimpse of what was happening on the island. Drones sent overhead were either shot down or mysteriously malfunctioned, crashing into the waves. Locals who tried to sneak closer were turned away by men in black uniforms, their faces hidden, their voices mechanical and unyielding. The world began to whisper, what had Oak Island given up this time? Then, slowly, cracks in the silence appeared. A fisherman, known in the nearby village for his honesty, swore that he had seen a convoy of trucks leaving the island at 3 a.m. He said their cargo wasn't just boxes or crates, it was something far larger, covered in sheets of reinforced steel. He claimed the trucks gave off a hum, as though the object inside wasn't lifeless, but alive or at least powered. Soon after, a worker who had been quietly dismissed from the project anonymously contacted an underground journalist. His voice shook during the interview. He said he had been there the night the ground shook. He said what they found was not a chest, not gold, not wood, but something metallic, something smooth, curved, and seamless. It looked, in his words, like part of a machine to advance for any time in history. And then came the detail that made the world shiver. It wasn't buried, the worker said. It was placed, as if someone or something had hidden it with intent. Governments denied everything. Press conferences dismissed it as misinformation, claiming the lockdown was for environmental safety. But the more they denied, the more people began to believe. Online communities swelled with theories. Historians dissected old maps and journals. Treasure hunters revisited the legends. Some pointed to the Knights Templar. Others said it was older, tied to Atlantis, or even the builders of the Great Pyramids. And then came the strangest leak of all. A fragment of audio, just 30 seconds long, appeared briefly on a dark forum before it was removed. It was garbled, distorted, but one thing could be heard clearly, a voice, trembling, whispering the same phrase over and over. It's not from here. It's not from here. Was it a hoax, perhaps? But the urgency in the voice felt too real, too human, to dismiss. Rick and Marty, once the faces of hope and adventure on Oak Island, were now shells of themselves. A rare photograph captured them leaving a meeting in Halifax. They looked pale, exhausted, their eyes red. When pressed by a reporter, Rick simply muttered, "We were never supposed to find it." Those words lit the fire again. Never supposed to find it. But the question was, what exactly had they found? Whispers continue to this day. Some believe whatever was unearthed now sits in a facility deep underground, guarded not just by soldiers, but by scientists and priests. Others claim it was moved overseas, hidden in vaults where no public eye will ever see it. And some believe it was never moved at all, that it still rests beneath Oak Island, deeper than anyone can reach, pulsing, waiting, alive. Because at night, even now, fishermen say the waters around the island glow faintly, a shimmer beneath the waves, blue, gold, the same colors first seen when the earth cracked open. And if that's true, then Oak Island's greatest secret isn't in the past. It's still happening. Right now. Over, the site was sealed. And by the next morning, the site was sealed. And by the next morning, Oak Island was no longer in the hands of treasure hunters. It belonged to someone else entirely. Black trucks rolled in, vehicles without logos, without markings, heavy equipment, Security teams in black uniforms, some carrying weapons, others carrying strange devices. Witnesses from nearby villages saw everything. They heard echoes from underground, loud enough to shake their homes. They saw lights blue, golden, unnatural. Some even said they smelled chemicals in the air, sharp and unfamiliar. And most chilling of all, they saw large containers being carried out of the sight. Containers covered, sealed, guarded tightly. What was inside them? No one could say, but the fear on the faces of those moving them was enough to tell the world that whatever was found was no ordinary treasure. And then, silence. The government took control. FBI agents were seen. Some said even international forces had arrived. Oak Island was no longer just an excavation site. It was now a place of secrecy, guarded by the highest levels of authority. Not even Rick and Marty were allowed free access. When asked what had happened, they said only one thing: it's no longer in our hands. That one line spread across the world like wildfire. What could they have found that was so powerful, so dangerous, that it was immediately taken out of their control? People began to speculate. Was it the treasure of the Knights Templar, gold worth hundreds of millions hidden for centuries? If it was, why keep it secret? Gold is valuable, yes, but not dangerous enough to require a lockdown. Then maybe it was something else. Some believed it was proof of an ancient civilization, artifacts that could rewrite history and force us to question everything we know about human origin. Others believed it was not human at all. Alien technology, an object from another world, something that could explain the strange lights, the chemical smells, the guards in biohazard suits. Theories spread across social media. Photos leaked, one in particular showing what looked like a golden chest glowing with light. People in protective suits stood around it. The photos spread fast, but disappeared even faster. Accounts were deleted, videos taken down, posts vanished as if they had never existed, which only made people believe it even more. If it was fake, why remove it? If it was real, then what did the world just lose the chance to see? Rick and Marty's silence added to the mystery. Normally open, normally talkative with their fans, they now spoke only in fragments. "It's not what you think," they said. Their faces showed fear, tension, unease, the kind of look people have when they know something too dangerous to say out loud. Meanwhile, locals kept talking. They said they heard machinery under the ground, as if something huge was moving. They said they saw shadows at night, lights that did not belong to the island. Some claimed to hear voices low, echoing, almost like chanting. Could it be imagination? Or was it something real, something alive under the soil of Oak Island? As the weeks passed, theories only grew. Some said it was treasure. Others said it was a relic from a lost world. And some believed it was proof that we are not alone in the universe. But no matter which theory you believed, one thing was certain: Oak Island was no longer just a mystery of the past. It had become a danger of the present. And yet, the questions remain. Why would the government step in so quickly? Why remove containers in the middle of the night? Why silence witnesses, erase posts, and pressure media outlets to stop reporting? Unless what was found was so powerful that revealing it could change everything we believe about history, religion, and the future of humanity. Imagine if it were true. If proof of an ancient civilization were uncovered, religions around the world could be shaken. People would question their faith. Entire systems of belief could collapse. Wars could break out. If it were alien technology, nations would fight to control it. A single artifact could tip the balance of power on Earth. And if it were something dangerous, something toxic, something alive, then hiding it might not be about power at all, it might be about survival. Oak Island, once known as the Cursed Island, now stands as the center of the greatest unsolved mystery of our time. Was it gold? Was it history? Or was it something not of this world? Only a few people know the truth, and they are not talking. But the silence speaks louder than words. A family living across the bay swore their windows rattled at night, not from wind or storms, but from a low, steady vibration that seemed to pulse from beneath the island, a vibration they described as breathing. Dogs refused to go near the shoreline. Birds avoided the trees closest to the excavation site. Nature itself seemed unsettled. Then came the blackout. For 3 full hours, the entire region around Oak Island went dark. No power, no communication. Phones failed, satellites flickered, GPS systems collapsed. When the lights finally returned, the only place still under blackout was Oak Island itself. To this day, the government denies it ever happened, calling it a localized grid failure. But locals who lived through it tell a different story. They said the sky above the island glowed faintly, the same blue-gold shimmer seen during the excavation. Some swore they saw a beam thin, sharp, rising straight into the heavens before it vanished. Whispers began to spread beyond treasure hunters and theorists. Scientists, military analysts, even theologians began debating Oak Island. What could make governments act with such speed, such force? What could trigger a blackout, silence eyewitnesses, and spark fear even in the faces of the Lagina brothers, the men who had dreamed their whole lives of uncovering the truth? And then, something unexpected happened. A leaked memo, stamped classified, surfaced briefly online. Its authenticity has never been proven, but its content sent shivers across every platform before it was erased. The memo referenced Oak Island directly, describing a non-terrestrial anomaly and advising that the object be secured for containment and potential weaponization. If the memo was real, it meant Oak Island was no longer just a mystery of history. It had become a prize in a silent war between powers. Rick and Marty were asked again about the shutdown in a rare, heavily controlled interview. Their answer was brief, almost rehearsed, but Rick's eyes betrayed him. He said, "We started out looking for treasure. What we found wasn't treasure. It was a warning." That one sentence ignited a storm. A warning from who? From what? Online forums pieced together the old legends. Some said the Knights Templar didn't bury gold at Oak Island, they buried something they were sworn to protect, something humanity wasn't ready to find. Others claimed the island wasn't cursed, it was sealed to keep something in. But the most chilling theory came from Emma Culligan, the missing researcher, whose private journal allegedly surfaced months later. The handwriting matched hers. The pages were frantic, filled with half-finished sentences, strange symbols, and drawings of a circular object covered in markings not seen in any known language. In one entry, Emma wrote, "It doesn't belong here. We opened something we can't close. They don't want treasure, they want to keep it quiet. If you're reading this, tell the world before it's too late." The journal vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, but not before copies of its pages spread. And suddenly, Oak Island wasn't just a story of lost gold. It had become something else entirely, something that touched the very edges of human existence. Because if Emma was right, if Oak Island was never about treasure, but about containment, then maybe the real question isn't what was buried there. It's what might come out. The world's eyes turned to Oak Island, but Oak Island itself had gone silent. Fences lined with sensors surrounded it now, guarded not by local authorities, but by operatives no one could identify. Fishermen were chased away if they drifted too close. Air traffic was restricted. Even satellites, some researchers noticed, began to blur or omit Oak Island imagery. Yet despite all efforts, fragments of the truth still leaked out. A contractor who worked on moving equipment from the island came forward, his face hidden. His voice altered. He said he'd helped load one of the containers. It was cold to the touch, even through thick gloves. When they lifted it, he swore he felt it vibrate, almost like a heartbeat. And then he added something that shook even the most hardened skeptics. It wasn't dead. Whatever it was, it knew we were there. That testimony was dismissed by the media as paranoia. But then came the footage. A grainy, 15-second clip appeared on encrypted forums. It showed the excavation site at night, under harsh floodlights. In the center stood a massive object, metallic, curved like a dome. Along its surface glowed faint pattern symbols that pulsed softly in blue and gold. Workers in hazmat suits circled it cautiously. Then, just before the footage cut out, the object shifted. It moved, slightly, as though it were adjusting itself. The clip was gone within hours, every copy erased, but not before it had been seen by millions. Suddenly, theories didn't feel like theories anymore. They felt like glimpses of something terrifyingly real. Religions began to weigh in. Some leaders urged calm, insisting Oak Island was a distraction, a hoax. Others warned that if the artifact was truly ancient, it could dismantle centuries of doctrine. One priest, speaking anonymously, confessed, "If this is what I think it is, it means the foundations of our faith were built on something we were never meant to see, something hidden, deliberately." Meanwhile, scientists whispered of an even darker possibility. The symbols didn't match any language on Earth, but their arrangement mathematical. Precise suggested design, a design that can only come from intelligence beyond humanity, alien. The word was no longer taboo. It was being said on the news, debated in parliaments, whispered in classrooms. If Oak Island had revealed proof of extraterrestrial presence, the entire order of the world was at risk. And yet, The deeper fear wasn't about who made it. It was about why it was buried. What if it wasn't a gift? What if it wasn't treasure? What if Oak Island was never about discovery at all, but about containment? A lock, a prison, a warning that had lasted centuries, broken open by human greed. Because even now, locals claimed the island was changing. They spoke of nights where the air grew metallic, sharp to breathe, of shadows moving where no one walked, of voices carried on the wind, low, rhythmic, almost like chanting. Fishermen swore the water churned without reason, glowing faintly beneath the waves. And then came the message. Late one night, an anonymous radio operator picked up a signal faint, distorted, pulsing at a frequency unlike anything natural. It repeated the same sequence over and over, 3 tones, a pause, then 3 more. When scientists analyzed it, they realized it wasn't random. It was a pattern. And worse, it wasn't coming from above. It was coming from beneath Oak Island. The signal grew stronger. At first, only amateur radio operators noticed it, capturing the faint tones late at night. But soon, entire labs began picking it up, universities, military installations, even NASA. It was undeniable now. Something beneath Oak Island was broadcasting. Governments rushed to deny it, but their very denial only confirmed what the world already suspected. This was no coincidence. The tones, when mapped visually, revealed shaped circles within circles, intersecting lines, almost like a star map. Astronomers compared it against known constellations, and to their shock, the patterns didn't match Earth's sky. They matched a formation only visible deep in space, far beyond our solar system. Someone or something was sending coordinates. But was it calling to us, or calling for us? Theories exploded. Some said it was a beacon, finally awakened after centuries of sleep. Others feared it was a distress call, a signal to something or someone waiting to return. And then came the disappearances. Emma Culligan, the young researcher whose journal hinted at truths too dangerous to share, had already vanished. But now, others were gone as well. A cameraman who filmed the night of the glowing excavation. A guard who confided to his brother about machines under the ground. A scientist flown in from Europe, seen entering Oak Island, never seen leaving. Their families received no answers, only silence. Rick and Marty Lagina, once the dreamers of this mystery, appeared in public less and less. When they did, their faces were haggard, their words clipped, as though they were speaking under invisible chains. At one rare event, a fan shouted from the crowd, "What did you find?" Rick stopped. He looked out, his eyes haunted, his mouth trembling as if to speak. But all he said was, "Pray it stays buried." That single phrase broke the internet. Pray it stays buried. What did that mean? That it wasn't treasure? That it wasn't technology? That it wasn't history? But something alive? Meanwhile, the locals began reporting something even more unsettling. Strange tides that pulled in unnatural directions. Boats drifting without wind or current. Lights under the waves, pulsing in rhythm with the radio signal. And at night, some swore they heard something far worse. A low groaning, deep beneath the island, like the sound of something stirring in its sleep. One fisherman, shaken and pale, put it best when he whispered to a reporter, "That island doesn't feel like land anymore. It feels like it's breathing." And still the trucks came, black, unmarked, rolling on and off the island at night. What were they carrying? What had been removed? And most terrifying of all, what had been left behind? Because if Oak Island was truly a lock, someone had just turned the key. The waters churned strangely, as if magnetic currents twisted through the tides. Migrating birds avoided the island entirely, veering away in flocks that darkened the horizon. Fishermen pulled up nets full of dead fish, their scales singed as though from invisible fire. Satellite imagery leaked online, showing faint glows at night rings of light under the soil, forming perfect geometric patterns. They pulsed in unison, like the heartbeat of something not of this earth. At first, governments called them lens flares, but insiders whispered the truth. Oak Island was waking up. And then, in the middle of a storm, it happened. A blinding flash tore through the island, visible for miles. The sound that followed was not thunder, but a deep, vibrating roar that rattled windows across Nova Scotia. Locals described it as a horn blast, others as a scream from the earth itself. Phones recorded it. The footage went viral before officials could pull it down. For 7 minutes, Oak Island glowed like a furnace. When the light finally died, something new had appeared. A structure metallic, impossibly smooth, jutting out of the swamp. Not stone, not wood. Something ancient, but advanced. Something that should not exist. Within hours, The island was sealed tighter than Area 51. Helicopters circled overhead. Ships with no flags patrolled the coast. Reporters who tried to approach vanished, but the locals could still hear it. Every night, from the swamp where the object emerged, came a low, rhythmic hum, like machinery or a heartbeat.